Welcome to the Higher Ed Geek Podcast, where we explore the impact of EdTech on the student experience with engaging, fun, and relevant conversations that honor the wide range of work happening all across the higher ed ecosystem. I'm your host, Dustin Ramsdell. I've been working in and around higher ed for the past decade, focused on student support and digital experience. Join me every week for discussions with some of the best minds in education technology who will be bringing you their perspectives on how digital transformation is reshaping the way we recruit, engage, and graduate learners. You'll hear firsthand accounts of how institutional leaders are developing their strategy, as well as get deeper on the stories of how these EdTech tools are being built to foster better student outcomes. With that, let's get to today's episode. Hello and welcome to this episode of the Higher Ed Geek Podcast, episode number 339, with Dr. Dave Duke from McGraw Hill, Chief Product Officer over there, continuing our ongoing conversations from a variety of perspectives on teaching, learning, academic integrity in higher education. This one taking a little bit of a different perspective. McGraw Hill doing things in courseware and different learning tools, but then also some study tools as well. Sharpen Advantage. You can check out a link to that in the episode description. But Dr. Duke also has an interesting background and just perspective on this work coming from psychology discipline. This is just a really interesting conversation and just, it's really educational for me, getting all these really smart, well-experienced and great folks coming onto the podcast to talk all about teaching and learning, AI's impacts, and just how AI at times can help enable academic integrity that kind of flies in the face of the conventional notions going out in the zeitgeist right now. So without further ado, please enjoy this episode number 339 with Dr. Dave Duke. I always feel like it is very valuable to get the big tenured players in the edtech space on here. They have a really unique kind of vantage point. One, just the scale of their work, and two, just the longitudinal kind of nature of their work. So we are here with Dr. Dave Duke from McGraw Hill. So if you want to briefly introduce yourself, kick things off as we always do, just go into a little bit more of your background, and then we'll talk more about kind of the work that McGraw Hill is doing currently, and of course, talk a little bit about AI.
Awesome. Sounds good. Thanks for the invitation to be here. I'm Dave Duke. As you mentioned, I like to describe my work as at the intersection of technology, human development, and culture. So I was originally trained as a clinical psychologist, but for the past 20 years, I've worked in ed tech. The majority of that time focusing in on institutions of higher education, so universities and colleges. I'm currently the Chief Product Officer at McGraw Hill. And in terms of my background, I was a first-generation college graduate, and so that shapes a lot of my perspective on education and what I bring to the table in terms of product design. And I think a lot about that in terms of how we increase access to high-quality education. And I like to think that we bring that design focus into our products at McGraw Hill. One of our missions is an education for all, and so that's always been really important to me and connected to my background. So happy to be with you today.
Yeah, it's very interesting stuff. And I guess, like the just way that you are channeling and applying like a background in clinical psychology, the idea of like, education is deeply human, just the ways that we interact with it or user experiences in the environments. I think you always just have to very much acknowledge the human element of all that kind of stuff. But again, McGraw Hill, I think most people, I would say it's nearly a household name, especially in the education space. If you want to kind of explain a little bit about the work that McGraw Hill does, your role there as the Chief Product Officer, because I assume maybe the work has been changing a lot over the past several years and everything. So just give a snapshot, elevator pitch, if you will, or whatever, about kind of the work that McGraw Hill currently does.
Yeah, when I walk around with a McGraw Hill logo on a shirt somewhere, someone typically points it out and has some connection to McGraw Hill. So I'm not sure if you have used McGraw Hill in your education journey, but many have. We've been around a very long time, 138 years. We're a leading global provider of education solutions. We serve millions of students all the way across K-12, higher education, and professional markets. We support students and instructors at approximately, I think at last count, 12,000 school districts, 5,000 institutions of higher education. And so my role at McGraw Hill is I lead the product team supporting higher education. As you point out, I think the legacy connection to McGraw Hill most people have is textbooks, but in the higher ed business unit, we are over 90% digital, and we build many learning products, and most recently using artificial intelligence. And our core products typically support students and faculty who are either teaching or taking all the major course areas in a 2 to 4 year institution or college experience. And we recently launched a new enterprise business in the student success and study market called Sharpen Advantage, which I could talk more about in a little bit. But yes, it has changed a lot, the product development at McGraw Hill. And it's like many places right now, a really exciting time to be in the middle of all that.
Yeah. Back in my day was textbooks that I interacted with. But yeah, it is that idea of great learning happening in digital environments in many shapes and forms from, K through 12 through higher ed. And I think, it is exciting to see, especially right now with the past few years, is that AI, from my perspective, is just this like kind of catalyst. There's obviously just been a lot of change and evolution, maturation, whatever word you might want to use, but then we're just like adding a bit of a accelerant because it's just, oh wow, we can do what we were doing perhaps just more efficiently or more effectively or both, make it more dynamic and all that good stuff. It's definitely very exciting to see the work that you and others are doing in this space. But we're recording this right at the beginning of June. It'll come out a little bit afterwards, but just looking back at your background, some things you've been doing recently, you're recently part of a session at ASU GSV on academic integrity. We've talked about that topic with some of the other folks that were on the panel, Annie from Turnitin, and I think Jenny from Superhuman, formerly Grammarly. So I'm just curious to get your kind of input and 2 cents, you guys, just general reflections on the panel, the kind of group discussion, or just your perspective on how AI complicates and or enables efforts to maintain academic integrity, specifically within the higher ed context.
Yeah, so that was a great panel. It was a really good discussion, I think an important one. And there were some great panelists there, as you mentioned, some of them. Academic integrity in the age of AI is something we think a lot about at McGraw Hill. And the best way I can describe it, because some people ask, what has changed? Students have always been thought about cheating. Some have cheated. What's different about generative AI in that landscape or in that context? And I think one of the significant shifts is that Gen AI has made academic integrity less polar, meaning I think in the past, you were either academically honest or academically dishonest. It was fairly clear if you had cheated or not. And I think generative AI has muddied the water there and created a diffusion. And I'll give you some examples just to illustrate my point, which is that I think students, we study this a lot at McGraw Hill, students are making rational decisions about when and when not to use AI, even if what they're doing isn't necessarily permissible. So I think about this across a series of trade-offs. So one of them might be the time trade-off, which is you're a student, you're working on a homework assignment, maybe you're a non-traditional student, so you've got kids, I don't know what you've got going on, and you just run out of time, right? And so you were like, okay, let me just use AI to do my homework because I'm paying for my own education. I can't afford to flunk this class. And it's more important to me to do that than to not turn in the homework assignment. Another one might be the learning gap trade-off. So you're working on, let's say, a STEM subject, and it's in the middle of the night also. This is when students do their work. It's in the middle of the night.
Right.
And you run into a learning gap, and you can't move forward. So you use AI to close that gap, bridge that gap, and then you move on. Or maybe a last one would be the allocation trade-off. So maybe you're already a good writer, and so tomorrow you have a paper due, but also a biology exam. And you think to yourself, okay, I'm already a good writer. I do have to write the paper, but writing this yet another paper is not going to make me a significantly better writer. But AI can't help me with this biology exam in the class. So I'm going to outsource my paper to AI, and then I'm going to spend time studying biology so that I can do well at both. Now, all three of those trade-offs maybe isn't good. It's highlighting some things students are doing that are maybe going around the rules, but it's rational. And so we spend some time at McGraw Hill thinking about those rational trade-off decisions and how can we give students enough productive options with AI so that they don't have to do that in the first place. And I'll connect this to one other thing, and then I'll let you get a word in. We've been calling this the proficiency dilemma, which is this idea that if you look at entry-level job descriptions right now, almost all of them in all parts of the economy include some aspect of being proficient in AI in a skill domain. And yet, if you survey faculty members, and we have, you're going to get a mixed review whether or not those faculty members think that they should be helping students establish AI proficiency. So then when do they establish it? And so we're on this precipice of having a group of students who are perhaps over reliant on AI and yet don't know how to use it professionally. And so, as it relates to academic integrity, I think we need to look at those strategic trade off decisions, understand the proficiency dilemma, and then design that into the products.
Yeah, I think that is a really interesting way to look at this, and I think it makes sense because of your kind of psychology background. But that idea of like decision making that can, and really, frankly, to me, it just feels like it is a powerful engine for empathy to understand rationally why someone would do something or not do something and all those sort of things. But then, yeah, if you can really channel that and embed it into product design, like what's going to help solve those problems or relieve some of those constraints or whatever, while maintaining academic integrity or transparency, because I think there's a lot of different approaches to that. And again, could have back to that panel, folks can look back in our episode library for conversations with Annie. I will also tease we have an episode with Jenny coming up in the near future, so folks can look forward to that as well. But I think it is the idea that you think between the three of you, I know certainly just having spoken to Annie very recently, there is just a lot of ways to approach using AI in an intentional way, getting down to maybe even the assignment level, or just ways that maybe that student late at night can get the help that they need immediately, or things can happen more in collaboration with the faculty member, and all of that. Again, it just to me is that idea of that we have this catalyst that is providing so much great kind of fodder for kind of just rethinking the way that we approach teaching and learning and assessments and all that kind of good stuff. But so there's a couple different things that you mentioned. Sharpen Advantage, we'll get to that in a moment. But I think there's also some AI enhancements that you all have recently introduced that I think are reflective of kind of what you're getting at and everything. So I believe it's Connect. So if you want to just kind of give a brief, again, elevator pitch of that in case folks aren't particularly aware, and then how that platform reflects your perspective on just kind of these AI enhancements and how it's just reshaping teaching and learning.
We recently launched several new AI-enabled product experiences inside our flagship Connect platform, which serves our core market and manages everything from reading to assessment to practice, et cetera. And we rolled out something called AI Reader not too long ago, which is an embedded AI reading assistant directly into our ebook experience. And it's been wildly successful. I think the last numbers I got last week is we had over 50 million generations of AI Reader over the last several months. And it's really interesting. We always laugh to ourselves because we hear time and time again that students don't read, and yet we have all this data in our ebooks about students reading massively. They just don't read page to page, cover to cover, as many people might want them to, but they're absolutely reading. We had another tool called Translation Tool, which is what you might think AI translation. Gives students the ability inside the reading experience to translate a paragraph or some section into their native language for multilingual students and put it side by side. So we're really focused on reading comprehension and enhancing the reading experience. But the important part about that being connected to academic integrity, or that discussion we were having, is that we've embedded that experience inside the reading experience. So it's purpose built. It only does three things. And so when students encounter that at a time of need, and we've actually studied this because we had so many generations, we were a little bit worried, hey, are students using this in some way we're not aware of to circumvent the reading process? But when we actually studied it, we learned that a lot of the generations are coming from our Smart Book product, which is an adaptive reading product. Students read and then they encounter adaptive questioning along the way to reinforce their learning and check comprehension. And when we looked at the reading engagement and behavior, students were encountering a question, and when they got it wrong, then they were going to AI Reader to get support, which is exactly what we want them to do. All of the product team are high-fiving each other when we saw that report and that study come back internally. But when you design products embedded in a platform for a specific purpose, students are using them in very productive and appropriate ways. It's only when students go outside of the learning experience on their own and start using chatbots that maybe don't have as many guardrails or aren't designed for a particular purpose. I'll just cover another one that we just launched called Learning Coach, which is a conversational AI tutor or coach that's also inside Connect. And our idea with this product launch was every course that a faculty member teaches typically has 3 to 5 concepts that are killer concepts, the ones that students have a hard time with. In psychology, think like operant conditioning, right? Something like that. It's conceptual, maybe difficult, and if you don't understand it, you'll have a hard time moving on with progress. And so we partnered with a company called Chiron Learning, who specializes in building coaches, because this is something we're really focused on right now. What's the difference between an AI assistant and an AI coach? If you think about a coaching relationship you've had in your life, how is that different than maybe a relationship you had where someone was just assisting you with something? You can think of it that way. And so we've dumped a lot of time and energy into crafting these on-demand coaching moments when a faculty member may not be around. Maybe it's late at night and the student's prepping for a lecture the next day and they're having trouble understanding operant conditioning. They can engage with an AI coach that has been designed to manage or facilitate a conversation with them that is in a coaching based philosophy and style toward comprehension. And so that's where we're having a lot of success right now, is embedding these into the learning platforms where students are already doing work, giving them a purpose, and the rest takes care of itself.
Yeah, I think that's a really good clarification there, distinction of, because I don't know, a lot of people espouse, oh, great, yeah, like everybody can have an AI assistant in their pocket and doing all those things. And it's like, yeah, you tell an assistant to go do things for you or whatever. And it's like, that's all well and good, but certainly within a teaching and learning environment, you'd want somebody who is coaching where ultimately you are the one that is, doing the thing. They might provide a lot of guidance and encouragement and reinforcement and allow you to practice and even give you feedback. So I think that is, like just that nuance where while you're navigating and interfacing with assignments and readings and all that kind of stuff, the coach is going to be greatly helpful and I think very appropriate. But I think we're even just now seeing in a couple of years just the real strategic value of exactly what you're getting at is how you can be just a little bit more precise in the way that you are deploying AI enhanced tools and platforms and stuff. And so, yeah, that's really great to hear. And I think just another really cool thing, just to make sure we get to it with the time that we have here, you announced the launch of Sharpen Advantage about a year ago. So I'm just curious, reflections on the response to that tool so far, or just generally around the context that it came about, because I think it is, again, a very specific, very intentional deployment of how AI can be beneficial to students within this new era.
Yeah, thank you for asking about Sharpen. We're having a great time with this one. For those of you who aren't familiar with Sharpen, it's our popular study app. And I like to tell the genesis story of Sharpen because we really focused in on student behavior and how students were studying. This was all about studying. And whenever we studied, how students were studying, we found some really interesting information and behavioral choices that students were making. Students were creating their own proprietary workflows. They would have a series of tabs open, maybe across several influencers, maybe a YouTube channel. They would be in a Discord forum over here, and they would have some websites, and then their own notes tab open, and they would create their own ecosystem to operate within. And a lot of it was mobile based. And so we built Sharpen with that in mind. And so Sharpen leverages bite-sized short videos, kind of TikTok style videos, if you will, flashcards, study materials, quick assessments. But what we like to say is you can prep for your exam if you have a free hand and a working thumb kind of thing, because you can scroll through Sharpen just like you would social media. So we launched that and we had a lot of success. It's available on the app stores. There's a free version if you want to go check it out. And students started using that. And then as they were, and we started talking with institutions more about Sharpen and the value of it, we got more and more use cases from instructors and administrators who wanted in on Sharpen and they wanted to contribute. And they were having some feature requests and some wanting to know how students were using it and how they could help and how they could contribute. So we launched Sharpen Advantage, which is the enterprise version of Sharpen, meaning a whole institution can buy Sharpen for every single student, as opposed to a single student buying it maybe on the App Store. And there's 3 main features on Sharpen Advantage. We have something called Radar, which is an insights dashboard. We have something called Creator, which is a set of AI tools that instructors can use to generate custom study sets for students. And then we have something called Playlist, which is, you can think about that like a Spotify playlist that you can share with someone. So the workflow is this: An instructor might go into a radar dashboard, drill down to a class that they're teaching, see what students are struggling with as they use the Sharpen app, and they can use that information to then generate some supplemental study materials and then share it directly with students via a playlist right to their phone. And so this is really awesome for instructors because they finally have this platform that students like using. It's mobile based and it's just giving them a whole new toolkit to reach students. And students are using it, no shocker, in the evenings, after class, late at night, like all the engagement data is there. So from a product design perspective, we're hitting the bullseye here, but getting even better and better. So it's been awesome.
Yeah, and I appreciate kind of just even some of the clarifications there, sort of like direct to consumer version that like anybody can just use it ad hoc for their own purposes, but that there is that possibility of integrating it more intentionally into the institution's environment, which again I think is like kind of part of the dilemma here. Is like somebody, administrator, faculty member, whatever at an institution might be like, yeah, all these platforms and tools are super great, or whatever, but I have no insight into it, I have no control over it. So I think anytime any of these tools can like really just fluidly integrate with established platforms, or if you can set some parameters and guardrails on things, just however your institution wants to. Yeah, I think that's always a really good thing that I'm seeing and hearing, because I know that would be a worry for a lot of folks. But and yeah, I think it is really but just like a sign of the times, because it's just that idea of I was in like an old bookstore and they had all these old like Cliff Notes versions of books or whatever. That idea of like you're saying is like, yeah, they're reading, they're engaging, they want to learn and understand these concepts, they're trying to get relevant skills and knowledge from your classes and everything, and they prefer it or need it in a certain modality, in a certain form. And so I think that's I'm glad that there's been a good response, and that like you said, just really engaging with it. And any of these AI platforms and tools only just keep getting better and better as we continue to use them and provide feedback and different kind of
we also,
use cases, everything.
Yeah, I'll just jump in and also say we also want to give instructors the ability to participate in a platform like this, because what we're learning about studying in particular is a very unique in the sense that every person studies in a slightly different way. We all like to study in the way that we like to. And so the more tools, appropriate, trusted, reliable tools that we give students and instructors in an ecosystem that is safe, leveraging all of the power of the AI that you hear about out in the market, is a good thing. And it really does build, I think, AI fluency and competency, in addition to just trust between students and instructors. And we're looking forward to seeing how this platform grows over time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's awesome. As we start to wind down, I'm curious if, because I like to kind of get things that folks are maybe looking forward to, or trend lines that they're following and those sort of things, like just from your vantage point and your perspective, if it's anything tied into work that you're doing, the products that you mentioned, or just more broader contextual factors that are impacting our work in higher education every day, but just things that are kind of grabbing your attention that you're kind of keeping an eye on. What are you following right now in higher ed?
There's a lot to follow. As you well know, you've got a podcast on following it all. So
yeah.
there's a lot. I'll lift up three things. One is, I'm really paying attention to compute right now, because I think you mentioned that conference that I was attending about a month ago or so. That conference, ASU GSV, interesting. I would say the previous 2 years, we heard a lot about what is possible with AI. And this past year, many people know what's possible with AI. Now it's like, how do we actually build with this and use it and manage it and all of that? And all of that usage and all of that building has now created an environment where we have to start thinking about compute as all of this scales. And I think the market, to some degree, will probably take care of that. By the market, all of the larger LLM providers are probably going to have to come to grips with the idea that companies aren't going to be able to pay what they want people to pay for compute. And you think about that in the context of what an education cost and all of that. But a couple of years ago, compute was not a budget line item at a university. It probably wasn't a budget line item anywhere. And so now it is becoming that. And I think that's just one trend to watch. How does that get managed? What do the larger LLM providers do? How do universities plan to take on that cost to manage it? The second one I would say is faculty professional development regarding AI. If you survey a lot of institutions, you're going to get a very small number of them that have rolled out an enterprise-wide professional development program for faculty in terms of using AI. And I have a lot of empathy for faculty. They have a really hard job. If you're a PhD level chemist teaching chemistry, one, you have to teach chemistry and do research, and then you have to learn how to leverage AI in your own chemistry work. And then you have to learn how to teach and grade papers and all of the rest using AI. And so who teaches faculty all of that? So that trend line, I think, is one to watch. Are institutions going to invest in that for real? If they are, great. What will the impact of that be? If they don't, okay, what does that mean? So that's another one. And then lastly, and maybe more macro, but it's important as I sit in Washington, D.C. as we record this, is AI legislation. Will we make AI proficiency an important or core educational competency? Or what will happen with AI legislation? I think that's important as we think about everything we've already talked about, academic integrity and the proficiency dilemma and how students are using AI. I think that's definitely going to be a market making or changing event if we get more into AI legislation.
Yeah, that honestly, because I think most people probably think nowadays, like, oh, if legislation comes through, it's going to be like restrictive, harmful, impeding progress of AI. But honestly, it is that idea of like, yeah, maybe, because I feel like you've seen just a quiet move towards high schools or whatever else being like, oh, we're going to teach like financial literacy or whatever, like just certain things that are big steps in a new direction of just the requirements that states might be making for any of the educational organizations in the states. So like it could be that, yeah, like it's like, wow, this is actually a good thing. Like we're requiring as an institution or as like a state system or whatever, like literacy, fluency, whatever.
Yeah, and I would just jump in and say, I don't really have a lot of concerns that we're going to see legislation come out that is hyper restrictive, because I think outside of a few use cases, obviously issues regarding safety or mental health or things that are data privacy, all of these really sensitive, big issues, those may be more restrictive. But the rest of the legislation, I think people understand they want to allow more space for creativity and using AI in productive ways. And we want students who are graduating to be advantaged as they enter the workforce and the economy. I think one thing we're running into now is even if universities wanted to speed up, many of them, especially the universities that are less well positioned to make AI investments, they're not sure what is the best way to use AI and what is the best way to use it in the classroom. So I think some guidance there could actually speed us up and create clarity where there isn't clarity today.
That's also a very good point. Yeah, it could be just like, yeah, giving those frameworks, guidance, a toolbox or whatever else, because I think what I've experienced sometimes, it's just like there's like the AI guy at a company or an organization or whatever, so like they could individually maybe provide some coaching or resource or whatever, but it's like that's going to be pretty slow moving, especially if you're at like a big school or something, to not really be super scalable. But yeah, the idea of it would be, okay, this is what we endorse as this college or university or whatever else, like give that in addition to hopefully, yeah, maybe a self-paced course that somebody could take, like a faculty or staff member, and maybe have workshops and opportunities to have discussions or further exploration. So I think, yeah, it could be a lot of good things that could be coming through in terms of like formal, explicit legislation that gives a little more wind in the sails in the sense of like AI implementation becoming more ubiquitous, but it being strategic and done well, and leaders being supportive of their teams to learn about it and be accepting of it and excited about it. Yeah, definitely some good trend lines to follow there. But we will wrap up as we always do. Curious if you have some advice for other higher ed leaders navigating this moment.
My advice would be, one, get hands-on and participate. I think one of the worst things you could do right now is not participate in the AI transformation, if we want to call it that. And by participate, I mean use these tools, get to know them. Many of them are very easy to use. That's why adoption is skyrocketing so quickly. And even the ones that aren't super easy to use, you can learn. But that's going to be really important because we want an informed body of people who can influence and make decisions about how these tools get used. And one of the worst things we could have are decision makers making decisions about AI and they've never used AI in the first place. So get hands-on, participate. That leads into my second piece of advice, which would be develop a point of view about these topics and then test it. I think a lot of people don't want to go on podcasts like I'm doing right now and talk about AI because in 30 days, whatever I said is wrong. But that's okay. In 30 days, I'll just say I was wrong about that, or we learned something new. I think we all need to have a point of view, develop that on a fact base that is made available to us, put our own spin on that, get some experience, and then move from there. So that would be the second one. And then the third maybe is a little more sassy, which is watch people's feet. I used to have a mentor tell me that, which I know that sounds like a weird thing to say, but what I mean by that is watch people's feet in the sense that don't listen to what they say. Watch where they go. Watch what they do. I'll give you a core example, something I don't know that I've formed a point of view on yet, but I'm paying attention to. You've heard recently of all of the tech CEOs and other leaders at commencement ceremonies getting booed off of the stage by the younger generation. And yet we see usage in that same age group skyrocketing. So it's just interesting. I don't even know what to make of that yet. I'm still forming a point of view, but that's what I mean. I would just pay attention to what people are doing, where they're going, what they're actually building, and not just what they say, because people are saying lots of things right now. Pay attention to what they do. So those are my 3 pieces of advice.
Yeah. 3 for 1 special. That's great. All very good advice, because I think, that is like I get the sassiness of that final point of the same people who are booing commencement speakers talking about AI, they're using these tools a lot. They're not coming with pitchforks and torches towards their local data center or whatever. I think it is that idea of if you were to ask them, I think recognize the utility of these tools, but want everything to be done in a responsible way. Because I think certainly, that idea of somebody just sticking their head in the sand, but then still needing to make some decision around AI or whatever, and whatever opinions they may or may not have are just not informed by the facts, reality, and actually a tangible experience with tools and everything. That's where I think there is friction. It's people are responsibly applying AI and just getting dollar signs in their eyes in terms of oh man, if we get AI, we can just have no employees, right? Yeah, just do everything for us all the time, and we'll make in the profits or whatever else. I don't know. So I think there's certainly some understandable points of frustration, but it's the idea. I think there's just the room for better kind of mutual understanding, compromise, and sort of just responsible just use and implementation of these really powerful tools and everything across the board. But
I completely agree with you. I think what you're highlighting is the fact that this is not neat and tidy one way or the other. It's nuanced, and there are some people can critique something while also using it. And I think my point just is we need to do that work to understand this, right? And to understand how every stakeholder, certainly from a McGraw-Hill perspective, we want to understand how students in particular perceive and use these tools, both them and instructors and administrators. Every stakeholder has a slightly different perspective, but we're all sharing the same space, working on the same project, which is an education. And so it's an interesting time. Isn't this fun?
And every challenge is really just an opportunity. And this work is important and mission driven and just making positive impacts. But obviously, it just requires us to be acknowledging and interfacing with that complexity. And everything is just always more complicated than it looks like on the surface. This is great stuff. Great conversation. Really appreciate you sharing all that you did and all the great work that you and your team are doing there at McGraw-Hill. So ways to connect with you and McGraw-Hill and the different tools and things that we mentioned. If folks want to check them out in the episode description. But just really appreciate the conversation here.
Thanks, Dustin. Appreciate it. Glad being on.
Thanks for listening to the Higher Ed Geek podcast. This show is a proud member of the Enrollify network, home to Higher Ed's largest collection of podcasts. Enrollify is where higher ed goes to grow. So be sure to check out our other podcasts, webinars, video clips, blogs, and more. Visit Enrollify.org and subscribe for all the latest details and content drops directly to your inbox. Enrollify is brought to you by Element 451, the digital workforce platform for higher ed. Learn more at element451.com.